It's been a memorable opportunity to learn in the midst of some challenging personal circumstances. I need some levity now, John, thank you. I would like to dedicate this award to Dr. Russell James Falconer, part Jacques Cousteau, part Lord Winston, with a bit of Grizzly Adams thrown in for good measure. He treasured knowledge and learning as much as passing it on. In the course of my scholarship, I was privileged to be able to delve into many disciplines not necessarily associated with agriculture. Politics, history, philosophy, and physics all played a part in enriching the experience. The world needs Renaissance farmers, and Nuffield helps to form them. So, I'm here today to talk to you about sustainable agriculture, and I guess the most common question that I was asked was, how do we define that? Fortunately, we have books for just such an occasion. They're called dictionaries. And I pulled this one out. It's an adjective, and it means able to be maintained at a certain rate or level, or able to be upheld and defended. Now, I'm pretty sure I can make a case for some pretty harmful practices if they are involved in the process of saving human lives. But I think that the general public has an idea that it means the former rather than the latter. So that is the track on which my study proceeded. The peas. So here's my first actual agricultural reference. I just snuck it in there. But actually, the peas are what are commonly known as the 3 Ps of sustainability. They're profit, meaning the need to provide for everybody's needs with an element of growth and risk-reward. I don't think we can lose that because without profit, we can't do what we do. The second thing of the 3 Ps is people. That is to say that no one should suffer deprivation in this world. And lastly, there is the planet, the oft talked about planet. And so what we need to do is protect the resources to ensure survival of all organisms and ecosystems within it. Unfortunately, when it comes to all things agricultural and sustainable, we also have another P, which is politics. And politics has its own drivers and forces, and they change with economic cycles, with whoever's in government at the time, with crises. And so it's best to understand that the expediency of politics can sometimes overcome some of the other 3 more important Ps. I think it's important that we understand a little bit of history about agriculture, because it does inform some of the things that we've been talking about recently, and particularly which I picked up on yesterday. So I'm sorry to contradict one of the scholars from yesterday, but farming hasn't always been with us. About 11,500 years, so they say. It was part of the Neolithic Revolution, which actually, contrary to some popular belief, started with the sedentism of man before agriculture came along, sometimes as much as 8,000 years beforehand. But very early on, man was domesticating plants and animals to meet his own requirements. Crop failure was actually very common and often catastrophic, but out of that there developed 3 main cultivars which we still have with us today, which are rice and wheat and maize. They have some fundamental nutritional drawbacks which actually over the course of the Neolithic Revolution led to the life expectancy and indeed the average height of man reducing right up until the 18th century and the advent of science and medicine to help us better understand physiology. So it hasn't always been plain sailing. We need to appreciate that the hunter-gatherer diet that we evolved with is now very much back in fashion and is now known as balanced. But for them, it was just hunting and gathering. Food, I believe, is one of the main pillars of sustainability. It's something everybody needs, nobody can do without, and it actually occupies quite a lot of our resources. People have talked about this already, but I believe it sits at the pinnacle because it is absolutely necessary, and most resources that we consume in some way, shape or form go into food production. The good news is I've discovered that actually we have more than enough food. The statistics tell us that over the last 50 years we've gone from a slight worldwide deficit in terms of calories per person in the world to quite a substantial surplus of in the region of 15%. Unfortunately, over the same period of time, global food emergencies have more than doubled in the last 50 years to 30 per year. So something is going fundamentally wrong between food production and food distribution. So that is something that has become increasingly important. One of the issues we have in terms of distribution is food aid. If anyone doubts for a second that food aid is a means of political and economic self-serving, then they only need to look at this. In fact, you don't really need to consider the numbers there. Just follow the patterns. When one goes up, the other goes down. So wheat price goes up, food aid goes down. And this is a pattern that has been consistent since the 50s when food aid was first introduced. So I consider food aid to be damaging to sustainability in terms of our ability to feed the population. So we need more food. We're going to need more food. The figure of 50% more is continuously bandied about. I would say it's 35% because currently we're in a 15% surplus. So I don't think the gap is as wide as people tend to think it is in terms of pure production. It's mostly about managing distribution and wastage. We have better channels for distribution, we have better logistics and better communication than we've ever had, so it should be an issue that we should be able to solve. So as farmers, we then need to address the other 35% that's coming our way. During my travels, I found a number of areas that I considered to have enormous potential for productive capacity. Travelling through Eastern Europe, the Danube Delta, the water take there for Hungary, for instance, in terms of irrigation is only about 10% of what they would have tell us is sustainable. It is purely a lack of the infrastructure to do so that is holding back production. You look at the Ukraine, which was once Europe's breadbasket and would now appear to be the contents of the basket for want of some capital and political stability. So I believe that there is considerable potential on our doorstep to encourage and increase the amount of food that we grow. I firmly believe that there is also plenty of scope for individual improvement. If we look at the bottom quartile of efficiency in terms of production in the world, if we lifted them to the median, we would see an enormous increase in productivity, not necessarily with the use of any more resources than they currently use, purely in terms of management, education, and understanding of what is best for a business. So we need to produce more food, but obviously there is pressure on resources, and scarcity of resources is a reality. There are techniques and technologies already available to lift that bottom quartile of people into the median. So my experience was that was a matter of education, and I think that's always very doable. What was very encouraging for me is that many of the examples of this lifting of productivity were farmer-driven. I had a good time with the people of Arprased in Argentina, and they are a farmer-owned cooperative which acts as a hub for knowledge and education for the farmers throughout Argentina. I saw them in Rosario, where they had a bit of a crisis in terms of their soil structure and soil management. They'd seen soil organic matter go from 6% down to 2%, and they were addressing that by going to no-till techniques. I was told that it could be as much as 90% of that region was under no-till cropping techniques, given that the global figure, I believe, is in the region of 7 to 10%. That is quite a large uptake, and it will have significant impacts on the environment, but also for their profitability, because they are less exposed to some of the input problems that they have as they operate in a very hostile political environment. I was also very impressed in terms of some innovation of a different kind when we visited the Mason-Dixon farm in Pennsylvania. They had been operating their own anaerobic digesters as a source of energy for many, many years, and indeed developed a working model of a tractor that would run on a generator instead of an internal combustion engine. So these are farmer-driven incentives for people to follow and to emulate in order to be more sustainable in all its respects. Sorry, I've skipped ahead there a little bit. One thing I would say, and this is where the physics comes into it, is that we do need to be careful of unintended consequences. The chaos theory is alive and well, and it basically states that we are not sophisticated enough to measure all of the variables, nor to understand all of the potential outcomes. So just a little bit is required there in terms of caution. And finally, I'd like to wrap up by showing you this wonderful photo. My sons and I went down to the back of the farm and we caught an eel. Now, we went back to the house, took with the photo on my phone, and my wife said, "What did you do with the eel?" I said, "Well, we let it go." "Why did you let it go?" "Because it was a female." My wife cocked her head to one side and said, "How do you sex an eel?" My sons, ever vigilant to the potential of parental discomfort, pricked their ears up at this point. But I was able, much to my great relief, to tell them that it was because female eels stayed longer in the river systems and got larger before they travelled out to breed. So in that respect, it was a big let-off. But what it also captures is, I think, several potential views. I think the artistic view could be that the eel is a metaphor for how slippery and elusive sustainability is. The scientist's view could be, no, it's a barometer of the health of the waterway on the farm. But for me, and actually, there'll be farmers in the room saying, "Oh, he needs to mow that grass." For me, it demonstrates the value of an affinity and appreciation of your surroundings. And that, for me, is a very good definition of what sustainability is, and indeed a recommendation. Thank you very much.